Welcome to the Chiro Money Show, where we're helping chiropractors make better financial decisions so that they can build stability in their finances and a lifestyle that they love. We're your hosts, Chris Shield and Scott Campbell, financial planners with Align Wealth.
All right, excited to dive in today. We're just going to get right into it. The topic that we wanted to kind of touch on today was essentially like why being financially aligned with your spouse or your partner and being on the same team really matters more than anything else when it comes to like specific like financial strategies or returns on your investments or optimizing from a tax standpoint. Like if you are doing life with a partner or a spouse, being on the same page and financially aligned is by far the most important thing. So we wanted to dive in and have a kind of rich discussion about it, because from our standpoint, the happiest, most successful couples out there, they're not necessarily the richest, they're just the most aligned. So the topic of the conversation was really inspired by two households that we're currently working with. And we're going to kind of talk about two kind of situations that we see when it comes to being really well aligned and where there's opportunity to get better alignment with your finances and kind of break those down. Chris, why don't you start with we're going to kind of talk about two different kind of example households, clients. Let's dive in there first.
Yeah. So I'll set up what the aligned couple looks like. By no means are we saying when we speak alignment or talk about that, this doesn't mean that they both have the same financial education, the same interest in finances, or the same experience with money. Obviously, we recognize everybody's coming at this from a different background, different history, different values, different beliefs, and that is all personal. But what an aligned couple shares is that they are both engaged. They both value and are going to hold energy and space to do this deep work of planning and trying to live a better life through managing their finances. So they probably have some shared goals that they're working together. Again, doesn't mean they don't have their own individual things that they're going for, but they have at least some shared goals for their household, and they have, most importantly, open communication. So dialogue, the windows are open. They're talking about money and life together.
Yeah. To add on that, I think about one of our households that we were meeting with them the other day, and I kind of wanted to thank them as we ended the meeting to say, one spouse, she's not overly excited about money. She doesn't necessarily she's not a finance person, where her partner, he loves finance. He's a spreadsheet guy. He's an analytical guy. He's the one kind of driving the bus, so to speak, in a lot of ways with their finances. But his wife still continues to show up to every meeting, and you can tell that they're just connected and they're on the same page. And she understands that it's important to be at these meetings so that she's on the same page. They're all on the same page when it comes to, this process that we're going through on the financial planning front and helping them move forward. When we got through that conversation, it's really what kind of inspired doing a topic on this.
So tell them about the disconnected couple then, Scott. What's that look like?
Yeah. So I think a disconnected couple, I think it, like you said there about being aligned, like if you're in a partnership with someone, whether you're married or partner, whatever that looks like, if you're doing life together, you need to be on the same page with your finances. So I was thinking about a relatively new household that we're working with. They're doing a lot of great things in their finances, but one thing I've noticed that we need to work on together is that they're not quite on the same page with their finances. One spouse isn't participating in the financial meetings, right? And that has an impact because one person's kind of making all the financial decisions for the household. So there isn't that clear vision, that clear alignment in terms of where we are now, what needs to happen moving forward to get us into a better position to help us reach our goals, both short-term and long-term.
For sure. And it could be as simple as not having the context, right? I know for me, when I hear about something exciting and then I report that back to my wife, I'm telling it to her in a different way than I've absorbed it. And it doesn't hit home often. Most of the time, it doesn't hit with her the way it did with me when I originally heard it. And it's usually just the way I communicate because we're all still working on improving our communication skills. And I've noticed that one for me for sure. But the other thing is with this disconnected couple, if it's not one team approach and we're not talking about money, often there's quiet tensions building, maybe even resentment starts to build at the way the other partner is making decisions or spending money or not showing up in a certain way, right? Okay, so let's talk about why alignment matters, Scott.
Yeah, so I think I think we all know this, but when it comes to the divorce rate in North America, and I'm sure globally, like the biggest reason for that is fights around money. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I just read this we talked about Morgan Housel's book in a few episodes ago, something that he mentioned in that book, The Art of Spending Money. He talked about the 10 largest billionaires in the US have a combined 13 divorces between all of them. So there's some correlation there. Like just because you have all the money in the world and you're that rich doesn't absolve you from having conflicts with your spouse and getting into arguments and having these money fights that ultimately end in divorce. It's just, income doesn't have a correlation with being happy or successful or being on the same page with your spouse.
100%. The effort, the energy still needs to be put in to build your team. Like however you and your partner work together with money, that's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but it doesn't matter how much you earned. You can't earn your way out of that effort. It's required to find a system that works for you and your partner.
Yeah. And kind of like what you were mentioning earlier, like it doesn't necessarily mean that you need two kind of spreadsheet analytical people to make that alignment work. You just need to engage partners that want to make it work.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure. But there is like a minimum amount of knowledge, but like awareness that both spouses need to have. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
Like what would you say? Obviously, if you're, whatever the situation, if both partners are working or there's just one working and one in the house, like at bare minimum, we should know like what the total income is for the household, for the partnership, right?
Yep, for sure. For sure. Yeah. If there's a situation where you have a couple that neither are spreadsheet people, neither are analytical and like don't want to kind of dive into the numbers in that much detail, then we're going to talk about later about why you might want to consult with a third party. But if there's a situation like that, there's probably even more reason why you'd want to outsource, to be like, we need someone to kind of dive in and deep and help us put together a system so that we can get on the same page and help build simple systems so we know where we're at financially. Right?
For sure. Yeah. That's a great point, that it could be a situation where neither partner is really interested in it. And that's okay. You still need to get to that point where, at least income, you have some kind of spending plan or system around how you spend money. You have some goals and you have an idea of a framework of how decisions are made.
So what's first and foremost?
First, I think it's that vision piece. And obviously, I'm the big picture thinker. So this is a good one for me. Like, why are we even doing this? I'm sure you're not getting up out of bed every day just to pay the bills. There's probably reason or strong why or purpose or values behind like what you want out of life. So knowing what you're doing it all for and what you're optimizing for, I think you have to start there. It has to be some kind of shared vision of like, we're here in this position today and we're trying to get to here, or we've already got to here. And now that means we're going to do X, Y, Z. That's a starting point, I think.
Yeah. Are you aligned on the life that you want to be living together? I think it's important to have separate individual goals, but what are your combined goals as a household? Like, where do you want to be in a year from now, 3 years from now, 10 years from now? What does life look like? What are the things that you want to do? What are the potential things that you want to buy? Like, where do you want to live? And you have to be in somewhat aligned with that vision of the life that you're trying to build together.
Sure.
Right?
What's next?
Yeah, I want to touch on kind of in the same area to be aligned from a vision and goal standpoint. I think you also need to be aligned with your spending, because that ties directly into whether maybe there's a friction point there. If you're not aligned with how you spend and the systems on how you go about managing your cash flow month to month, it's going to be really hard for you to accomplish those shared goals if you are at that point where you do have shared goals and a shared vision, right? Like you need to be on the same page with how you execute your kind of systems and processes for your monthly spending and cash flow.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. I know that touches a little bit on our next point of like systems, and maybe where I would go next is like visibility. I think it's quite common in a lot of relationships where one spouse is kind of leading the charge from a financial standpoint and handling all the major decisions and maybe paying the bills and managing the bank accounts and whatnot. And in often cases, we see that the other spouse, they don't even know what the logins are to the bank accounts, let alone where they're at financially. I think visibility and having, even if you're not the one kind of making the day-to-day kind of transactions or paying the bills or kind of doing the major heavy lifting, which we'll get into like kind of roles and framework and decisions, but having clear visibility where everyone knows where they are where they stand financially in the household, I think is also such a big part of what true alignment looks like too.
And with that topic, it always makes me think of worst case scenario, right? What if, heaven forbid, what if the one leading the charge financially in the household, what if they pass away? And the surviving spouse not only has to grieve and like process and deal with this huge loss, but also then has to start from zero, potentially have no idea how anything is managed, where accounts are, how to access them. That's never a situation that we want to see somebody in, right? There's got to be at least that level, like you said, of visibility, of knowledge of where and how to access everything, and a baseline knowledge of what's happening.
Hey, before we keep going, if you've been listening and thinking, I could really use some clarity around where I truly stand with my finances, we've got you covered. Take our free financial clarity assessment. It only takes about 5 minutes, and you'll get a personalized scorecard showing exactly where you're strong, where you might be spinning your wheels a little bit, and where to focus next. You can head over to alignwealth.ca or just hit the link in the show notes. All right, cool. Back to the show. What's next?
Okay, so next is communication and roles and a good division of labor. I would kind of call this like who does what and when. And I think the biggest piece with this that I think of is like assumptions. Assumptions kill, and they cause potential issues. Not assuming anything that like just because one spouse has done it, or even if you've done it a certain way in your partnership, in your marriage for 10, 20 years, don't always assume that it just should continue that way. We need regular check-ins. We need that open communication where both people can stay informed. And like I kind of mentioned in the last point, hit by the bus test, like what if all of a sudden someone's not there? Can you still manage everything?
Sure. So the what I'm hearing, like the key takeaway there is like, one, have a clear plan on how and when you communicate about finances. Who's taking care of what? Everyone's clear on what their responsibilities are when it comes to managing the household finances. And then have a framework in terms of how you make decisions, especially the big decisions, like major purchases, what the goals are for the year, how much we're going to be spending towards, like, say, travel, or how much we're going to be paying down debt this year, how much are we going to be saving and investing this year. Like, there should be a framework on how you make those decisions. And that comes back to like clear communication and roles and whatnot, right? Yeah. So let's get practical. Let's try and break this down from our listeners' point of view of like, if they're whatever situation you're in right now, let's leave them with a framework that they can take away and go apply to their life. So tell us about the 5 C's framework, Chris.
I first heard of Abby Davison and Myra Strover on the Rational Reminder podcast. Abby was on episode 356, and it was just an impactful listen for me. And I think I listened to it once, and then Michelle and I listened to it together when we were driving somewhere. That's great. It was just developing this framework that you can use to approach any big financial decision. Really, that's what the whole thing is based on. It's how to make financial decisions as a couple. It's that money and love piece and how they are so interconnected, and we have to embrace that to make strong decisions together. There was lots of practical little tidbits that I got from that podcast. Definitely would encourage people to go check that out. But we'll dive into what this 5 C's framework is and how to use that. Okay. So let's say like maybe it's even helpful to like think of a big decision. Like we're thinking of moving, right? Like maybe we could use that as an example of like, okay, that's a big decision. Where do we even start here? Right. So with that in mind, the first step of the 5 C's framework is to clarify your values. So asking each other simply like, what matters most to each of us right now? Is it freedom? Is it security? Is it growth? Time? Like what value is kind of front and center right now that we think we want to optimize for or like gravitate towards? And this is really the starting point. Like if you can't clarify like the values piece and understand what you guys are trying to go for, it's really hard to move on from here. Okay. So with moving, okay, is this allowing for more time? Like more time doing the things? I got to bring up another reference point here. Carl Richards. We both love Carl Richards. He's a pretty renowned financial planner and author.
Friend of the show, right?
Friend of the show. I mean, I can't remember what the terminology he uses, like, but he's speaking of like his ideal life or like what matters most to him. And it's time with friends, mostly outside, and having an impact in his community. So like that would be like his mission statement for him personally. So that type of thing, like that's what I think about when I'm like, okay, what's important to me? What am I, let's clarify my values. If I'm going to consider a move, does that allow me more time outside? Because that's a shared value me and Carl have, because we're buds like that. Can I get on the ski hill more often? Can I run on more trails, up some mountains, that kind of stuff? Do I have more time with my family? Am I spending less or more time commuting? No commute because of I can make a blue wall anywhere kind of thing.
That's right.
But those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking through, first of all. And so then with your partner, start discussing those. Here's what matters to me. What's mattering most to you right now? Are we aligned on that? Okay, cool. Let's move on. So what's step 2 after we clarify values?
So step 2 is communicate, and communication skills kind of, I'm sure, ongoing when it comes to money and being in alignment with money. And this, if we want to stay on the topic of communication around a big major decision, like that in itself takes some like being open and having some raw conversations of not only about what your values are, but what does this look like for a family? Like talking about the number, like the financial impact of a major decision like this. Like it's okay to be vulnerable and to say like, moving here and buying like, say, a bigger house with a bigger mortgage, that might stress you out. Like I'm stressed out about the idea of the move, or I'm stressed out about the idea of taking on a bigger mortgage. Like we'll be able to afford that. Like just being vulnerable with your partner. And I think this always goes with all communication with money. You never want to find yourself in a position where going into a conversation about money, if you go into it knowing that there could be resentment and a possibility that it's just going to turn into an argument, both you and your spouse or partner need to, I think, adopt a rule. This is also a Carl Richards rule. Maybe you've heard this, Chris, but he talks about wearing what's called the no shame, no blame hat. Let's put our hat on that just clearly says right there on the hat, no shame, no blame. If you can go into a conversation with your spouse or partner with that mindset that there's no shame here, there's no blame. Let's just have an open conversation. Let's just get real. The outcome of that is likely going to put you in a position where you can make better financial decisions together as a unit.
Yeah, for sure. It's coming to understand each other's perspectives and opinions and values and emotions and whatever, everything else that's involved with a big decision like that, rather than to try to win like the other person over to your side or to what you think is the right outcome. It's exploring it with curiosity and no shame, no blame. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay. So next we've started, the communication lines are open. We've established our values and what's important to us right now. Next, we're going to lay out our choices. And I think that this one is so key. And it's really like, I've had a few times recently where actually like Michelle and I have been talking about something and I'm just like, okay, let's just stop. Like, there's probably another alternative that we're not thinking about yet that we can add to this. And even if it sounds stupid and it's probably not one we're going to consider, like let's just pile on all the options. What are the alternatives? What can we do? Let's lay them all out where we can see like ideally a side-by-side comparison of all of them. And let's just, work through it together to try to understand what those choices are. Then, it's just going to make the decision so much easier. I know it can almost seem counterintuitive to like open it up to more options rather than to like narrow it down to one or two. But I really think that having that open-mindedness to look at all the available alternatives, I think it helps you clearly know it's like, no, that's a no, that's a no, that's a no. Okay, good. We're back down to those one or two, but maybe we've come at it now from a different frame of mind or a different perspective, which is pretty cool.
For sure. Like the choices piece is so connected to the values piece. Like it makes those choices so much easier to make if you've done that work of like really defining what your values are and what you want out of like life together. It makes those choices so much easier to make. But it is important, like you said, to break down all your options and what's the best option, what's the best choice that's going to ultimately get us to where we want to go together, right? All right, so let's move on to C number 4, and that's consult. This is what we kind of talked about earlier. Maybe you're a household where you don't have 2 spreadsheet analytical people who really love the numbers and maybe one's a bit of a DIY investor planner on their own. There can be a lot of value in consulting a third party, a bit of a neutral voice. Like the benefit of, say, like when we're working with clients and we're consulting and collaborating and advising them when it comes to their finances and their financial plan is that we don't bring the same emotions to the conversations that couple does. We're purely looking at it of asking these questions like, well, what do you value most? Let's look at the choices and let's map this out together and collaborate together to help you get to where you want to go. And that can be so important in certain dynamics where two spouses have maybe slightly opposing viewpoints on what the best choice is to get them to their, maybe they have a shared goal, but they have different kind of viewpoints on how they're going to get there or how they think about certain things or what systems should be put in place or how they go about doing things in life together. Having that third party to uncover blind spots and to bring different perspectives. And I think a lot of our clients get the benefit when both of us are at the meeting that sometimes they get the viewpoint of both Chris and I, which can be very different sometimes.
Yeah.
But we look at things differently and having that there's such a benefit of having that third party at the table to have those conversations with. Is there anything you want to add to that, Chris?
No, just that like this could be also like a trusted mentor. It doesn't have to be a professional advisor. This could be a close friend. But I think the caution here is that you're coming at it with objectivity. You're not influenced by emotions or relationship to that person.
Right.
You know, if one of you reaches out to your close friend, obviously they're going to gravitate towards what you think is right. They might not be able to give you that objective advice. Yep. Just something to keep in mind there.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so then the fifth C here is consequences. This one is actually my favorite one. And
interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us why.
Well, lately I've just been finding myself asking two questions. What is the worst case scenario here?
You bring that up a lot. You bring that up a lot in client meetings, and I love it.
I do.
What's the worst case scenario if we make this decision? Yeah.
Well, okay. I'm out a little bit of money and I tried something really freaking scary, but it was a great adventure. And I have that experience now in my life. And if it didn't work out, I know I can come back to this and this can be like, I know exactly what I have right here. I could easily come back to this without much consequence. Then the flip side of that question is what's the best outcome that could happen?
Yeah.
And that's a pretty cool one to explore too. It's like, okay, well, I take this risk. It costs me a bit of time, energy, money, whatever resource it is, and look at what could happen from that. And then just recognizing that all of the decisions have a ripple effect. Making one strong decision here could actually make 5 or 10 decisions for you, right? If you decide to move rather than renovate your house, okay, well, now you don't have to make a decision on which contractor you hire and what color of, bathroom backsplash or whatever. You've eliminated those questions by making one decision early.
Sure.
Ripple effects on everything here.
All right. Before we move on, let's just recap those 5 C's. We want to clarify our values. We want to make sure we have strong communication skills with our spouse or partner. We want to lay out our choices. We want to consult a trusted either professional or a third party, some sort of mentor. And we want to analyze what the consequences are of our decisions, both in a good light and negative light. What's the worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That's great.
Chris, what would you say some of the most common objections are that you might hear or we might hear around why someone can't get into alignment with their finances with their significant other? That's number one.
Oftentimes we hear that like, my spouse just isn't interested. They just let me handle it. Like they don't want to be here. Like they don't care. Essentially, we hear that quite a bit. Hey, or see that.
We see that all the time. And in those particular situations, that's probably the most common for sure. In some cases, they might be somewhat aligned, but they're just not ever going to be on the full page if they're not going through that 5C framework and they're not aligned. If they're not clear on their values and they're having these ongoing conversations about money together, I think there's going to be strain on that relationship when it comes to money at the end of the day. It might not happen right away, but it could happen over time. So when we hear that objection, we quite honestly just kind of say like, too bad. You need to show up. That one partner that isn't so interested in being at, say, a financial planning conversation with Chris and I, too bad. We wouldn't ask you to be here if it wasn't important, right?
We're not asking you to do it all. We're not asking you to take over, but minimum, you got to be there.
Get involved in the conversation, understand the big picture, ask some questions, right? Because of I think about this all the time. If both partners are at, say, a good conversation, a good planning meeting with the two of us, I know for a fact that after that meeting concludes, conversation sparks between those two people. There's going to be a conversation about what we just talked about, right?
Yeah. Sometimes we see that.
Good, bad, ugly. Sometimes it happens during the actual meeting.
Just like, time out. We just need to talk about this for a minute. But you're totally right. Even if it's just to spur on the conversation in a positive way, it is so helpful. to show up and be there. Right.
For sure. And the last point I'll make on this, and I brought it up earlier, if we learn something or have something to take away and we bring it to our spouse or significant other and they weren't part of that original conversation, it's really hard to relay over the full message. I think about the conversations that we'll have with couples around, all right, we're going to apply this system or this process into your finances because it's going to have this outcome that we're looking for, right? To then have to relay that whole conversation and then what that system will look like over to your spouse that wasn't part of that, potentially half an hour long conversation with us, it's going to be hard to relay and convince that person that this is something going to be worthwhile implementing into our life. Right. All right. So the next what's the next one that we see?
When one person wants to just manage it all. My partner doesn't need to be here. I manage all the finances. I'm the person. We don't need them. I mean, obviously, from our perspective, I think I've found myself saying this often. If you're married, especially if you're in a new relationship, whatever, but if you're committed to a partner and married, you kind of signed up to do it together. There's not one person. There's no dictatorship in a marriage. It's a partnership, right? Collaboration is better. It's the only way.
Absolutely. For sure.
Yeah.
I can speak for myself. I'm the finance person in our household. And you'd probably say the same, Chris, but it does not mean that we are in some sort of dictatorship where it's, I manage the finances and what I say goes. No, I might play a role in our finances that's, greater in terms of certain responsibilities with managing finances in our household, but we are on the same page and same team when it comes to the overall big picture and what we want out of our finances and what we want out of life. Okay.
The last one, the last kind of common objection that we hear is that, oh, well, it's just going to cause a fight. Every time we talk about money, it causes an issue and a fight. And super common. It happens. Ultimately, there's some kind of misalignment there, right? Like something is causing this strife and we need to deal with it. So if that's brought up, like our feedback is usually you need to structure the convo. You need to schedule it and you need to come at it from a fresh perspective, starting with gratitude is a good idea and just appreciating each other.
Yeah, we're going to put that no shame, no blame hat on. That's where it starts. We understand that we typically will come to the table and have a conversation and end up fighting about money. We're going to scrap that idea. We're going to come to the table with gratitude and appreciation for each other. Let's put our no shame, no blame hat on and not let's put emotions to the side. Let's try and have a conversation. If that ultimately means we still can't get on the same page with our finances, then I'd probably lean towards maybe that's where you would want to consult with a third party, be that a professional or someone that you trust to help you kind of mediate and have some conversation to get you guys on the same page and moving forward in a better direction.
All right, Scott. So let's wrap it up here. What are the takeaways? What's the key points to remember here?
I think the takeaway at the end of the day is first and foremost, hopefully what you took away from this conversation is that alignment with your spouse or partner is just so powerful. If you are on the same page when it comes to your finances with your partner, I think you'll have a great outcome when it comes to what you want to achieve in life. And that it's not driven by how much money you earn, or I said, like your financial strategies or tax optimization, all that aside. If you're on the same page with your partner, with your finances, you will likely build a great life together. But action step number one, make sure everyone's on the same page. Make sure everyone has visibility on where things stand with your finances. Start talking about what your structure and systems will look like from a spending standpoint. That's so important. Like, are you on the same page with your goals? And then from there, just make a commitment to each other that you are going to continue to check in. Like, what is the cadence? Are you going to be checking in on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? Like you decide. I'm not going to tell you what to do. What's best for you guys? Commit to it. Commit to each other and have those ongoing conversations. Go through this kind of framework that we're talking about today, and the outcome is going to be very positive. We're sure of it. Yeah,
for sure. I just got to add in here one little point with recurring check-in cadence. One of the biggest wins in my personal finance and mine and Michelle's in the last couple of years is implementing the behavioral cash flow system. It's not budgeting. There's no entering in every dollar that you've spent in every category. The categories don't matter. What matters is you have a spendable amount that you're trying to keep within. Yeah. But ultimately what I love about it is it creates a recurring monthly check-in without actually having to do anything.
Right.
Our spendable amount is whatever it is, $3,000. Okay. Are we on track? And we have that shared accountability. at all times throughout the month. And we'll usually check in mid-month and be like, all right, like our spending's a little lower, a little high, whatever. And we check in at the end of the month, beginning of the next month. And that's our other recurring check-in that just from our system is essentially automated and happens without much effort. Huge win.
I love it. Well, I hope you took away something from this conversation. If you're getting benefit from this show, please share it with another chiropractor or a friend that you know. Leave us a review, leave a comment. And maybe the last thing I'll leave you with is that we finally have our podcast website live, thechiromoneyshow.ca. At some point, we're going to start bugging our listeners here to submit some questions that they would like to have answered on a future episode. I would love to start doing like a mailbag episode where we can collect some questions from listeners and dive into those. I think there's always result in some great conversations. So I'll leave you with that call to action and appreciate you being here. And we'll talk to you next time.
See you next time.
All opinions expressed on the Chiro Money Show are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be considered financial, legal, accounting, or tax advice. Always consult your own team of licensed professionals before making decisions about your finances.